Today we're going to take a look at the Well Done Foundation's monitoring process. It's the pre-work that goes into filling and capping the well. And this process can take 6 to 9 months presently, although I think they're hoping to get that down to 3 months in the future. I'll let Curtis and Rory describe what they're doing for the most part, but there were a couple things we filmed that we didn't catch the description on camera, so I'll jump in and fill in the gaps there. But let's get going. Take it away, Curtis.
So as I started to think more about this, this abandoned well issue or this orphaned well issue, it really became a journey of discovery for me and for our team at the Well Done Foundation. So I started acquiring equipment, analyzation equipment, so gas monitoring equipment. And I remember when I bought my first gas monitor, I was so excited to get back up to the patch here in Shelby and drove up and started going fishing, right? And I put the probe into the first well and started to pump on the bulb, and the thing lit up like a Christmas tree. For me, it was like that experience when I was a child fishing and you get a nibble on your pole, and the first thing you do is you jerk hard and you pull the pole out of the water. And so what I did is just kept pumping harder and harder and harder until the equipment was completely, over limit. But what it did is it showed that, it validated the theory that these wells were producing or had a presence of methane gas. And so then the next step was really to determine, okay, we know that there's gas there. So I started to go around to multiple wells to see if it was just a singular well or if it was many wells. And lo and behold, yes, it was many wells. In fact, just about every well. And so the next step in the process was to determine how much gas is it actually producing. So there's two parts of our measurement equation. The first is presence, and then the second is flow. So that's where we came up with the idea then of the dynamic flux chamber. And what we did is we read some studies that were produced by probably the U.S. foremost leading authority on orphan wells, Dr. Mary Kang. And Dr. Kang was involved in her doctorate thesis at Stanford University. And she had been studying wells in West Virginia, so she had written several papers. And so, being the great internet researcher that I am, I printed that off and went to work copying her design. Of course, we've embellished on that a little bit and made it Well Done's own. But essentially, we use that same process. And what's important about that is that it creates a controlled environment that is the same, consistent from well to well to well. So that allows us then to scientifically create a baseline then that's relevant from each individual well. So as we built our first dynamic flux chamber and we deployed it into the field, then the next thing was to figure out, okay, how much volume is there and how quickly does it regenerate after we flush the chamber free of gas? We put the caps back on, and how quickly does it take to come up? Well, literally when I deployed our first chamber, I had barely got the chamber over the well and had time to pick up my monitoring equipment to test for the presence of gas, and it was already full. And so that led us to developing our protocol for doing the flush test. And so the flush test is where we evacuate the chamber of all of the gas, we quickly cap it, and we time how long it takes for it to fill back up. And that's how we calculate our cubic feet. That was good, and it worked for a while because, again, remember this journey of discovery. We're getting these little clues, and we're starting to piece the puzzle all together. So then the next step was to develop a more scientific flow methodology by using some different instrumentation. And that's actually the instrumentation that we're using today as we're doing our testing.
We have a lot of experience in the oil and gas firm, in the oil and gas industry. And so we have great greenhouse gas accounting skills specific to oil and gas. The other thing that we do is methodology development for carbon offsets. We have been thinking through the way that we monitor the pre-plugging gas fluxes, and that's how we ultimately will quantify the offsets. And so we've been talking a lot with him about what types of technology are good, like the gas camera or the flow meter. And those data points enable us to be able to go back to American Carbon Registry and say, this makes sense from a monitoring perspective, or this doesn't make sense. And then we can start generating offsets once we have a set methodology to do that. So this is my first time in Montana and my first time out in the field with Curtis.
So the first step is always when we come to an orphan well, whether it's under a monitoring regime or whether it's just open, is to verify the presence of gas. The good news is many of the wells that are in our program today, and there's nearly 80 of them, is that we have a really good idea of what that, not only that the well is hot, but what that signature should be, right? And so, but we still, in order to be consistent with our protocol, we follow step by step the process.
To illustrate the presence and consistency of gas among the wells, we visited several within the field. Some had started the monitoring process, while some were still open. The remnants of brittle pipes still lay beside some wells. Rory and Curtis discussed monitoring techniques and equipment, while I and the other observers looked on. Then we set our focus to the well that would be capped that week.
And so that's what we did yesterday. We came to the well, we addressed it, we opened up the testing port and immediately stuck the gas tester in, the 4-gas tester in, to verify the presence of gas. And of course, it registered a signature. So then we record that signature, it data logs automatically, and then we download it to the computer to run a report.
The bag Curtis is filling here is a Tedlar bag, and those samples are being sent to a third-party laboratory, Energy Labs in Billings, Montana, for testing and verification.
And then the next step then is to just verify flow. And so we removed the gas probe, we inserted then the flow probe, and that's where we then started to go through our flow measurements. Now, flow measurements, the way that we measure flow in these chambers is over a elongated period of time, and we're pulling data samples as often as every 30 seconds to just show what the movements are, what the fluctuations are of that gas movement. It's not necessarily a consistent flow, and we see that there's variations. So what we do then is we then create an average, and that's how we establish what the flow is. And then that average for each well, we adjust continually as we get new data points, right? So we develop a cumulative running average for that particular well, at least a minimum of once a month. Yep. Yeah, and that whole process per well, once a month, is at least an hour long by the time we run through all of the testing. So at different hours of the day and night and different weather conditions. I wish every day was like this. I wish I could say that, but it's not quite. There are times when I definitely question my career choices, right? Like I should be doing anything else, but now we've come so far, and many of these wells we've been testing for over 9 months, is to really determine and to acquire multiple data points. So this is a very data-rich environment. So it's all about data, different times of the day, different temperatures, different wind conditions. But the exciting thing is, or not, I guess depending on how you look at it, is that it's a pretty consistent measurement from well to well. And so that's how we track and we understand. From there, then, we prioritize that list to say, okay, we've got 10 of these wells are super emitters, and those are the ones that we want to focus on first. And from there, we go out and we work with our network, our team does, to try to find a suitable adopter, if you would, or sponsor for the particular well, and that's what is going on with this well here today. Actually, we've got a businessman from New York, a fellow named Joel Citron, who has adopted this well along with the Well Done Foundation and has funded its closing. And so hats off to that fella for being passionate about the environment and for really taking affirmative steps to do something and to set an example for others. Like this well today, I mentioned earlier it was 5,984 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emission per year. And if you think about what that means to you and me, My car, the average car that I drive, emits about 4.5 tons of carbon dioxide per year. So it really means me and 1,400 of my closest friends all driving our cars around for a year and then stopping that completely. And that's the equivalent. So, a pretty massive impact. And what's awesome about this is that the impact is immediate. For me, that's just the icing on the cake. It makes like I said, all of those late nights and cold, freezing fingers worth it to be able to stick the probe in the well and come back with zeros.
As our partnership grows, we would really like to see this scale. So you've got to start somewhere, which is a pilot project that's just developing credits here in Montana with the plugged wells to date as he kind of rolls them on. Way more across North America in general and even greater numbers globally. So there's lots of opportunity for us to think about this and other regions where there are abandoned wells. From an offset perspective, it's a no-brainer because you're doing good for the people, you're doing good for the planet, you're doing good for your local community. It's pretty easy to quantify once we get the details finessed. And so it makes it that much easier to think about, like, how do we replicate this to Kansas or Colorado or Texas, up through Alberta or down in Mexico.
Those are Tuesday's highlights and a good overview of their developing monitoring process. Like Curtis said, it's a very data-rich environment, and he's really meticulous about taking notes on everything. But as fun as data can be, it's nothing if those open wells aren't sealed up. So get your coveralls and hard hats ready, because the drilling rig will be rolling in next week's video, and they'll be sealing that baby up. Subscribe so you don't miss any of the plug-in goodness. Thanks for watching, and have a great day. And I'll leave you with some time-lapse footage I took as a reminder to myself that these open wells are venting every day. 3.2 million, day and night, out of sight and out of mind. But now we know.